today we're going to be talking about one of the fan favorite units in this game, Lionheart Cermia, or the Moonlight version of Fire Cermia. Now this unit has been very powerful after her buffs to her S2, which basically makes it so that you don't really need her on speed anymore because she gets a CR push now with that defense buff and that effect resist buff, and also because they actually buff the damage of her S3, which also hits extremely hard. So Lionheart Cermia is a top pick from the Moonlight recruitment event that is still going on, and we're just going to be talking about how you want to use her, how you want to build her, and in what situations you want to actually pick her in PvP. Now this unit is going to be only for PvP for the most part, so if you are looking for a good PvE unit, Lionheart Cermia is not really going to be that. But in PvP, she's extremely powerful into the current meta units, and you'll see play with her pretty much all the time. She's pretty meta-proof because of how powerful her S2 is. So let's actually talk about her skills so you guys can see why she's so strong. So the first thing we're going to talk about actually is her S2. It's far from over. This is going to be a 2-turn cooldown skill, and it is her passive ability. You're going to see she uses Fighting Spirit, and you're going to see after an ally suffers an extra attack, counter attack, or dual attack, she will dispel all debuffs inflicted on herself, so it's a full cleanse, and CR push by 20%, and then activate Shine. Now Shine is going to be a defense buff and effect resist buff for 2 turns and will give her 50 Fighting Spirit. Next we have her S3, which costs 80 Fighting Spirit, so by activating her S2 you can actually use her S3 on the first turn that you take with her, because she starts with 40 and she gains 50 from Shine, and this only costs 80, and it will be an AoE attack that will give her an extra turn. This AoE attack will penetrate defense by 50%, and the damage dealt will scale with Lionheart Cermia's defense. So she is a defense scaling warrior, and this penetrates defense and it hits super hard. This is one of the harder hitting skills in the game, and that extra turn is very nice because you'll still have 1 turn left on this defense buff and this effect resist buff, and you can S1 after, which will do a ton of damage, which also scales with your defense. You can even soul burn it for 10 souls and it will do crazy single target damage. So basically how you want to use her is you pick her into counterattack, dual attack, or extra attack units such as like Abyssal Euphine, Conqueror Lilius with their S1, Ocean Breeze Luca with their S2, right? Anything that can counter or has extra attacks. And if she procs this and she S3s, you're at a very huge advantage because this does a ton of AoE damage. Even if they have like an Arrowell that's mitigating damage for them, just with 2 of these S3s, you're probably going to end up killing that Arrowell because that Escort will make her take so much damage. And pretty much this unit becomes a must ban or a must avoid because of how powerful her S3 is. And she's super tanky because you build her on high defense and you have that defense buff, and hard to actually strip of that defense buff because of that increased effect resist, and she's just very annoying to deal with. Now, she does get countered by units that penetrate defense because she's not going to be too health most of the time. You're probably going to focus on defense. So units like Remnant Violet, anything with defense penetration that can one-shot her is very good. So you have to be very careful when you actually pick her. But for the most part, honestly, if you just pick her into a counterattack unit that activates her passive pretty frequently, even against damage penetrating units, you should be good to go because this defense buff will make you extremely tanky. Now, looking at her build, so there's going to be 2 ways to build her. The first way is going to be Destruction set with Crit Chance set. The second way is going to be Lifesteal set with Crit Chance set. So you're going to want to run Crit Chance set because you don't really need penetration because most of her damage comes from this AoE S3. And Crit Chance is going to be the best option for gear score because it just gives you the most stats, numbers wise. And the main stat, or the main set, you want either Destruction or Lifesteal. It really depends how you want to play her. Do you want to play her more as a nuker or as a tanky bruiser that will actually grind out battles against teams with like Conqueror Lilius and Navy Captain Landy and stuff like that. Now either playstyle works, it's just up to you and what gear you have. And honestly, they both kind of fit the same role. So I have mine on Destruction, but both sets will actually run the same stats pretty much. So what you want at the bare minimum, of course, you want 100% crit chance. And this is easy to get if you have imprints because her imprint gives you crit chance, which is very nice. So 100% crit chance. If you're on Destruction set, you want at least 320% crit damage. If you're on Lifesteal, anything above like 260 should be okay. For speed, you don't really need too much speed, just main stat speed on your boots should be fine. Having a little bit extra speed's okay, but speed's not required on her anymore because you have this CR push on your S2, and also your S1 will give you speed buff, so you don't really have to worry about speed too much, but as long as you're above like 160 or 150-ish, you should be okay. And for health and defense, at the bare minimum for health, I'd say 13,000, like the absolute bare minimum. For defense, the bare minimum is 2,000. Obviously, more is better, but that is the bare minimum to actually play her. And you also want 50% effect resist if you can. And the reason for that is because her S2 gives you this defense buff, which will amplify your damage of your S3 and S1 by a lot. And it also gives you 50% effect resist buff. And by having 50% effect resist built in from your stats, you'll reach 100% effect resist, meaning that Meteor Calyx S2 can't strip you. Zero effectiveness Air Wells can't strip you as well, which is very, very important. You really want to make sure you do hit that 100% effect resist because of that, so you don't get stripped, and also because there's other units in the game that can provoke you and silence you even, so you want to make sure that you have some effect resist so you can protect yourself and get your S3 off. If you have your S2 proccing all the time, but you can't actually S3 because you get CC'd, Lionheart Cermia is kind of useless. If your buffs get stripped, kind of useless as well. So you definitely want to aim for 50% effect resist if you can. It's not really a requirement, but it will definitely help a lot. But the defense, health, crit chance, and crit damage, definitely the most important things you want to aim for. Now for her artifact, there's two options. You can run her on Golden Rose. This is the option that you want to run if you're running her on Destruction Set. This will give her a ton more damage when she's above 50%. And when she actually dips below 50%, usually one S3 will heal you back up to full pretty much, or even an S1 with a Soul Burn. So very important to have on her if you're running her on Destruction Set. If you're running her on the Lifesteal variant, what you actually want to do is run her on Proof of Valor to actually make her tankier. This will actually make it so that she's actually a super tanky bruiser, and it will make her a lot more effective and live longer so you can lifesteal more as well. If you don't have Golden Rose, I would probably say that you probably want to run her on the Lifesteal variant because this artifact is pretty important for her. Without this, you have 0 sustain, which is pretty bad for Lionheart Cermia because even though she nukes very hard, a lot of the times you're picking her into units like Navy Captain Landy and Abyssal Euphine, and sometimes you need to get multiple S3s to actually win, and most of the time you actually do, so for that reason you want some sustain built in. So Golden Rose is kind of a requirement for Destruction Set. Alternatively, you can run her on Sigurd's Scythe if you have her, but it's not as good because her scaling on her attack is not that great compared to defense. Also, if you don't want to use a Proof of Valor, just Draco Plate is okay. Just keep in mind if you're running Draco Plate on Destruction Set though, and no sustain, or Proof of Valor on Destruction Set, you're kind of on a timer, so without any sustain for her, I definitely would say you're better off playing the Lifesteal Set variant. And for her skills, because she's a full damage dealer, you definitely want to Mulagora everything. The most important thing you Mulagora is your S2. You want this at a 2-turn cooldown because when this procs, you S3, and then you take an extra turn with your S3 to S1, and the cooldown on your S2 is pretty much gone. So basically, you can chain this over and over every turn cycle if you actually Mula this. So it's the most important thing to do. After that, it's your S3. Your S1 is the least priority, but it's still very nice to have because this hits extremely hard, especially with the Soul Burn. So you definitely want to make sure that you Mulagora her as much as you can because she is pretty much a full damage unit with some tanky capabilities. Now, for who you want to pick her against, I would stay away from picking her into Cleave. She's not that great into Cleave unless they have extra attacks, such as like Commander Pavel, but even then she's pretty scary because, or they're pretty scary to pick her into because a lot of Cleave teams can just out-cycle her, even though she gets the push from her S2, and she kind of just dies to a lot of units with defense penetration or even CC or high effectiveness, so you have to be very careful. Also, you want to be careful picking her into units such as, like I mentioned, Remnant Violet. Remnant Violet can penetrate defense. Pretty good counter into her, honestly, because he can actually just kind of one-shot her with his S3. Especially if you have a Soul Burn, where you can Soul Burn S1 into S3, and then she kind of dies. You also want to be careful picking her into a unit such as like Spirit Eye Selene, because, you know, very reliant on crits, and Spirit Eye Selene will actually take her down pretty easily because you don't have, even though you have an extra turn, Spirit Eye Selene will still counter you. Also, Savior Aiden, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes around the team comps that are actually around both those units. Savior Aiden sometimes can do well, but most of the time, you should be okay picking Lionheart Cermia if you can actually proc this counter and actually get her going with the S2 passive procs. So you have to be very careful sometimes, but honestly, I'd say in general, Lionheart Cermia is a pretty safe unit to pick. The only thing is you want to pick her into a team that will activate her S2. If you don't pick her into a team that can activate her S2, she's not really useful because you kind of want to be cycling your S3 over and over. So you want to pick her into units like Conquerlius, who will eventually be forced into S1ing to proc Lionheart Cermia's S2 passive. Another good unit that was meta a long time, or not a long time ago, but a while back, is Ocean Breeze Luca's S2. It is going to proc Lionheart Cermia's what's it called, S2 as well. You can also pick her into Abyssal Euphine, who I don't have, sadly. I miss pity on her. Or Navy Captain Landy, two very prevalent units. They're going to be pretty weak against Lionheart Cermia because they activate her passive. Bellion's also pretty good because they're going to be on counter a lot of times. Even units such as Ikarina can be okay to pick her into because Ikarinas are going to be on counter set like 90% of the time. So you kind of get what I'm saying. Anything with counterattacks, even like Shu that we just landed on with her S3 counterattack chance. Anything with counterattacks, dual attacks, extra attacks, Lionheart Cermia is going to be a very, very good pick, and she is going to end up being banned a lot of the times because she's super scary to play into, because you never really know what kind of Lionheart Cermia you're facing, right? If you pick a squishy team and they pick Lionheart Cermia because you have a dual attacker, if that Lionheart Cermia is on my build, like a full destruction damage build, you might just get one shot. If they're on a lifesteal build, they might just carry the entire fight because you'll never be able to kill them, right? So, very scary unit. If you pick her from the Moonlight Hero recruitment event, you should be very happy. She's very strong into the current meta, very fun, and very waifu. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Lionheart Cermia, guys. Let me know down below if you guys have her and what you guys have her built on, and I'll see you guys next video.